Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here every week on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And this week, we are talking about how your outside passions inform your leadership, right? So, first of all, my philosophy, and you can let me know what your philosophy is, Robert. And for you watching and listening, we would love to hear your philosophy. You can share in the comments. Is that every experience is a learning experience, right? It's an opportunity to learn something. And not only the experiences that we have, but the things that we are passionate about, the things that we do for fun and enjoy. And I think we started this conversation a couple of days ago in our thought leader meeting, our planning meeting, about tennis, right? And both you and I have a connection to tennis, and there are certainly lessons to be learned about leadership in life and that. And you mentioned Francis Tiafoe, and so, and today, on the day we record this, Roger Federer announced his retirement. I'm like sad. So Serena's evolved. Roger's retired. Serena's evolved. Venus is agnostic about the whole
thing. Somewhere in the middle.
But we can take so much from the things that we are passionate about and apply them in life and in our leadership. So my philosophy, every experience is a learning experience. And so what say you?
I agree. I think that every philosophy, every experience is a learning experience if you're open to it and if you're aware. I think that sometimes we have experiences that we don't know we're learning from them until later.
Right. Rearview mirror.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot easier to do that sometimes than to, of course, when you have a failure, you're always disappointed. But if you take the mindset of things didn't go the way that I planned them to, what can I learn from this? It can be an enriching experience. So I agree with you.
Yeah, it is interesting. When we were first talking about this, Francis had just lost in the semifinals, right? And, I always feel for athletes when, immediately after they lose something, there's someone with their microphone in their face asking them, how do you feel about, I feel like I just lost and I don't like it, right? Which you're not allowed to say. But he was probably as close to that as anybody I've seen to actually saying something along that line. He was very gracious, but still, that moment where you are feeling the agony of defeat and someone's trying to, extrapolate something from you. And then a couple of days later, he was on, or the day after, or whatever it was, he was on Good Morning America with Robin. What's her name? Robin.
I forget.
Anyway, Good Morning America. And he was on with her. And he was much more measured, right? And I think that the opportunity to have, like you said, a little bit of removal, and then you can start to process. And when you're processing, you can work through your thoughts, your feelings, and then the lessons can start to come from that. So I absolutely agree with you. It may not be that the lessons show up in the very moment. It's nice when they do, but the willingness to take lessons from our experiences, and particularly the things that we're passionate about, right? It's not always just in when we're failing. There are lessons to be learned when you succeed. There are lessons to be learned when you fail or make a mistake. There are lessons to be learned when you're just living life, and it is being in the moment, paying attention and then somewhere down the line, opening yourself up for the lessons to flow through you. And so we're going to talk. I wrote a couple of articles a few years back for the Association of Corporate Counsels Docket magazine. They are going to be part of my forthcoming book as well. One article is called Leading from Behind, and the other one is Running for Grace. And both of them are about my experience as a runner, a not very good runner, but a runner nonetheless. And a runner nonetheless, because the definition of running right here becomes the first lesson that I would throw out. The definition of running is that both feet are off the ground at the same time. It's not a particular speed. It's not anything, grand. It's just at some point, both feet are off the ground at the same time. And for a long time, I didn't own being a runner because I wasn't fast. And so, I said jogger, or I would say, really fast walker, which is not true either. I'm not a fast walker. But I didn't own running. And it's, for me, the first lesson starts with defining success for yourself, right? Defining success your way and not letting the world define success for you. And so as a leader, right, it is incumbent upon you to have a vision, and when you're working with other people, leading a team, making sure everybody's on the same page about what that vision is, what you're working towards, and what success looks like, right? You get to define that together. So
yeah, I really love the idea of leading from behind, because if you're behind, you can see what's going on. If you're always in the front, you don't have that perspective. So when you're behind, you can see the back, you can see the middle, and you can see a little bit of the front, right? You can start to see, all right, well, this is what's happening back here. These are the people that are pulling up the rear. They may not be as quote unquote talented as other people, but what do they have to offer? What are they bringing to the group? And the same thing with the middle. In the middle, you have some folks that are maybe striving to catch up to those folks in the front. And so you get an opportunity to see what they're made of, what their thought process is. Are they looking at those people in the front for inspiration? And you get to see a little bit of what's going on in the front. Are the front runners, do they feel that they're rock stars? Are they helping the people that are behind them? Are they giving them tips? Are they trying to help those people that want to be better actually be better?
Yeah. And leading there's some pushing and pulling, right? That's a part of this. It is an opportunity, certainly when you are leading from behind, an opportunity to push people, right? And not always be pulling, because pulling exerts a different energy, takes a different energy from you, takes a different energy from them. And pushing is something altogether different. So, the concept behind that article was that I am still to this day, usually am, the one who is at the back of the pack. But my being at the back of the pack is not indicative of my leadership position or my heart or my willingness to be involved. A lot of people, if they're going to be at the back, they won't participate, right? We've got a fear of failure, fear of not winning, and that just is not the case. Again, because I'm defining success my way, right? And for me, giving my best effort is success when it comes to running, and in some other things. In other areas, that definition changes. And so understanding where people are, why they are there, right? Why are other people at the back of the pack or in the middle of the pack, right? Why are they there? Is it because of some limitation physical or mental, right? A limiting belief. Is there something else going on? Is it a matter of motivation? Understanding that, right? Not just asking them, but observing them gives you an opportunity to understand how you need to work with them to get the best out of them, to move them forward. And my experiences and what prompted that article was that I was the leader, co-leader of a running group at the time. And as new women came and joined our group, they showed up with some concern that they wouldn't be able to do the run, right? We were running 3.5, 4 miles like every morning. And someone comes up new, they've not run before, they're a little concerned. And we're out running, it's dark. And so they're running, concerned about being alone, running in the dark, and whether or not they can finish it. And my approach was, you absolutely can finish it. You don't have to run. There's what Martin Luther King quote that says, run when you can, walk when you have to. Something very similar to that. And we have to remember that and remind our people that when we're in this together, right? When we're in this together, I'm going to be there to help you, push you, pull you, and you are doing that for other people. And ultimately, all of us get the support and encouragement that we need as part of a team.
Yeah, I think it really, we're talking about outside passions, and I think it really, it depends on what forum you're using, right? Because you run with the team and a group of people, and
sometimes, yeah,
and it's really, you can start to see that, and there's a dynamic there. Sometimes I think it's harder to learn from things when your outside passion is a solo kind of thing. I remember when I started learning photography, and this is funny because I came to photography just because I needed to get a video camera, right? And I was like, well, I'm going to buy this camera. I'm going to do some videos. And we talked about that, you and I, and put some videos. And I said, well, it's kind of stupid for me to have this nice camera and not know how to take pictures. And my evolution as a person better than most people. I'm a musician, and I, studied years to be able to play my instrument. And I hate to admit this, but I always thought of photographers as, that's easy. You just take this thing until I started learning how to take pictures. And I was like, this is one of the hardest things I've ever learned to do. I had to learn about aperture, and the smaller numbers mean the aperture is bigger. Bigger numbers,
right? Remembering which way it goes, right? Yeah.
And the shutter speed, and learning that that exposure triangle. And and once I started looking at that, I started to learn certain things. And so from really acclimating myself and teaching myself photography, I learned how to look at things, how to really observe things. I learned that, because it's not just about what you see, because sometimes what you see through the lens is not it's not what you're really aiming at. So to really see what's going on, so it's taken that, and I was able to use that, and in other aspects of my life. Let me be patient. Let me look at this from a different angle. Something's black. Let me move over here, and I was able to take that, but it took a while to get there because I had to have that epiphany first of, oh, this isn't easy.
What I love about that is, I'm a photographer as well. And they're part of one of the lessons I learned in that is your point about what you see in the lens, right? And stepping back and sort of having a vision for what it is you're trying to capture. Right? That it's not just you point it at something and you get an image back. And it's the same with music, right? When I was learning to play, I played the flute, I played the piano. You can be very technical at something. You'd be very technical at photography. You're a musician, right? You'd be very technical at your instrument, but that doesn't translate to beautiful music,
No,
beautiful pictures, right? And that it takes another level. And the same thing can be said of your leadership. You could be doing all the things right, right? Whatever those things are, you could be doing those things right, and it's not translating and you getting the outcome that you want with your team. You're not getting the result that you want with your team. And you have to take a step back and ask, what piece of me is sort of missing? And you're talking about passion. It's because you put your passion into it, right? You're putting your energy and your soul into it. You're not just doing the steps. You're not just pointing the camera and clicking. You're not just, playing all the right keys on the piano, right? You can do that. And that was the kind of pianist I am, is sort of, I can play all the right keys, but it doesn't sound like beautiful music, right? When I listen to other people and you watch them performing, right? And it emanates from their body, from their soul. And that makes a difference. And it's the same with leadership.
Yeah, there's a certain a lot of things, of course, when you start speaking, I start flagging. But three things, or really two things that I grabbed onto, was that these art forms, and even running, if we really dig down, are both a science and an art. You can have the science of leadership down, but if you don't have the art of leadership down, you're not going to be as successful. You can have the difficult conversation with someone, but if you're not paying attention to how they're receiving it and adjusting, your tone of voice and your message, and being empathetic when you need to be empathetic, you're going to have a hard time. And so there is a science to it and there's an art to it. It's the same thing with photography, the same thing with running. There's an art to that, especially when you're running races. I was a competitive runner for many years. So there's an art to being a musician, of course, and there's a science to it. So when you're just going through the motions and you're being mechanical, you're applying the science. But when you can flex and you can improvise and you can say, okay, technically I should be doing this, but I'm going to leave it out because I think it will be more powerful. That is the art of leadership. And I think that's what's really important.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. Art and science. And it applies in so many other things. So we've discovered that we have passion for running, for music, for photography. What else? What other passions do you have?
I'm a martial artist as well. I'm a martial artist. And so I studied martial arts for many years. And I think that the main thing that I've learned, besides how to protect myself, is really how to learn, how to be patient, really important, how to communicate with others, because I'm a teacher, and how to listen, and also how to see when someone is not getting something. That's a situation where I've applied situational leadership. I've applied that, that leadership theory. This person doesn't know a whole lot. Well, I need to give them a lot of information. I need to give them a lot of instruction. I need to give them a lot of suggestions because they're enthusiastic, but they have zero competence. So I want to stoke that enthusiasm and pair it with some competence so they can learn more. Now, the more information you give them is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to hit the wall at some point. And so they may become the disillusioned learner, right? That's the second part of that. And so you have to offer more encouragement to them to help them to build their confidence. And so I was able to do that. I was like, as I was teaching a class, and I was like, I have a bunch of different people in different levels of competence. What am I going to do? And I said, oh yeah, I have something for that. So there's all these comparisons and things that we can mesh or mash up with our passions.
I absolutely agree. So, I would not call myself a martial artist. I did take some bok fu, and got my third stripe on my orange belt. And so I was moving along. I did it because my son was taking lessons and moving through. And I thought, if it's good for him, maybe it would be good for me, right? And one of the other things that you get from martial arts is discipline, right? So one of the things I learned was discipline. Absolutely, patience is a part of that, and grace, right there. And there's an opportunity in so much of what we do to extend ourselves some grace as well as extending others. And I would say that that translates to tennis. Now, I haven't played tennis competitively in decades.
Don't say it. Don't just say a long time.
Decades. Decades. But a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to get back. Well, I take that back. It hasn't been decades. It's been about a decade. And I belonged to a racket club and was part of the tennis team there that competed with other clubs. But I decided a few years ago that I wanted to get back into it. So I enrolled in a class at the community college. And as someone who has lots of passions and done things and maybe had a period of time when you haven't done that thing, but you go back to it and it's sort of like, there's a part of you that's like, it's sort of like riding a bike. And then there's a part of you where it's like you're starting all over from scratch.
Where's the pedal? Where's the pedal?
You're starting like a beginner. But then I found myself not having patience for the beginners in class. And it was really interesting how once I was there and hit the ball a few times, was hitting against the wall and sort of found the groove, even though I hadn't played in a while, that my patience for other people and their learning was like not there. And it took a minute for me to say, look, whether it's tennis, you coming back, or you taking on something else brand new, right? You've got to be patient and you've got to extend grace to other people. And as a leader, talking about teaching people things, right? That has to be part of the equation, that everyone comes to the table where they are, right? People are where they are. And our job as leaders is to meet them there and then help them to move on. It's not to, expect them to be anywhere other than where they are in this moment.
You were being the pace setter, right? We talk about the different types of leadership. That's the pace setter, the person that is an expert, and you don't have the patience for people who are lagging behind. You want to be able to show people something, one thing, one time, and then move on. Even though you're just in the class, you're like, how come they can't get it when the teacher's showing them stuff? So that's a very important lesson. Everybody has their own pace. And I think that we sometimes forget that, especially when we're good at something. Now, I am not a tennis player. I really enjoy watching it. I can watch tennis with the best of them, but I am not a player. I'm not a tennis player, but I enjoy the game. I think it's one of the aspects of the game that I really like is the fact that it's so mental. It's you against the other person, but it's really you against yourself and the other person. And sometimes the other person is working with that part of you that's working against you as well. And you can see that when some of these players just get they really just start having a hard time because they're not serving well or their backhand isn't working. And then the other player sees that and starts capitalizing on the mental decline on the other side. So that is one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated about that. I'm now reading The Inner Game of Tennis. It was gifted to me a while ago, and I've read a whole bunch of other books on sports psychology. and this one is like the last in the series that I'm reading right now. And the thing that I love about the book is it applies to nearly anything you want to be good at, because it's not just about tennis. It's about any time you perform. And leadership is a performance. It's a performance. And sometimes people forget that. It's not just about going to your job and walking around and telling people what your title is. It's about performing the job or performing the tasks of leadership. It's about all those things. So looking at your team, seeing where they are strong, seeing where they're weak, and coming up with a plan to move their weaknesses forward. I mean, their strengths forward, and help them improve their weaknesses. And I think that a lot of times leaders just they get stuck in a rut where they're like, well, I have this position. And because I have this position, that's going to make people follow me. That doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. You said it doesn't always work. It often doesn't work. And as you were talking in sort of that mental game made me think of golf, which is another one of my huge passions. And the lessons that I've learned, again, patience, defining your own success. But you were talking about when your serve isn't working, when your, backhand isn't working in tennis. And here's the interesting thing about golf, right? It's like that one shot that you hit in an 18-hole round, right? And you're hitting 72 plus shots, right? Or regular mortals hitting 90, 100 shots or more, right? Professionals somewhere between 65 and 70 shots per round. And it is that one that you hit perfectly. You hit it, it was solid, it goes down the fairway, or you hit the putt and it just rolls in perfectly. It's like that one shot that keeps you coming back for more, right? That says, yes, I can do this. Yes, I am talented. And when I think of sort of connecting that and tying it to leadership, is when we have that, help someone have that aha moment, right? When they grasp something and you go, this is why I'm doing this. This is what I love about leading and teaching and helping people to become the best that they can be. That, like that one moment, right? That aha moment that you can help somebody have.
Yeah, and I have a question for you, Whitnie. Thinking about this, and I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I don't know if it's a question or a statement or both. I think sometimes people have, because I had this thought that, well, what does being creative, how does that translate into my leadership? And I know we took that creativity course when we were in school, and it was mind-blowing. It was a great experience. But I think what happens is when we're talking about leadership and creativity and how your outside passions or the things that allow you to be creative, how they influence your leadership, a lot of times it's not conscious. It just starts to happen because you develop skills in these things. So I want to just put that out there. So I guess it's more of a statement, and just really ask you what you think about that, because I think that confuses a lot of people. It's not that you're directly translate, but you get this habit that translates over to other things in your life. And you can start to see a lot of times it's unconscious. You're not really thinking about it. There
Right.
are times when you can say, okay, I did learn this thing in photography, or I learned this thing music, and I can apply this here. But most of the time it is just intuitive.
Right. And it just becomes a part of who you are. And it is in maybe the intentional moments where you're like, you're asking the question, where did that come from? Or where did I learn that? Or where did I pick that up? and you go, oh, it was, on the golf course, or I was painting, or
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're doing, right? And which is why, again, it goes back to every experience is a learning experience. If you are open to it being so, because you're just living your life, and the things that you're doing, particularly if you're pursuing your passions, right, are helping you to live your best life, as trite as that may sound. It's helping you to be a better person. And as you become so, it can't help but influence and inform the way you're leading, right? And I haven't done any research on this, but I'm going to hazard to guess that people who are not the best leaders are not particularly happy in life, right? I have no empirical data to support that, but my observation is that they are people who tend not to be particularly happy, and that is what oozes out, right? That so they interact with people from where they're coming from in their lives, and people who are happy and joy filled and fulfilling their passions and other things, while they may not be the best leader, right, they are at least sharing the goodness and the gifts that they have in a way that other people can receive them. So maybe that's a project for us.
Yeah, maybe.
Do the research on that.
Well, and I wanted to bring that up, right? You're right. That's probably a project in there for us. But I wanted to bring that up because I have yet to hear a leader go, "Let me go be creative right now," and it just doesn't happen. There,
Right.
It's something that they work on, that it becomes a part of them that they can tap into. They can look at problems a little bit differently because they have that side of their brain that they tap into on a regular basis,
Right.
or a semi-regular basis. So they're used to going there. And I remember when we went to that class, there's a question of, how do you, how do you become creative? It's something that you can learn. We
can learn it.
You can learn to be more creative. It's not, there's no gene for creativity. There's no tennis gene. Kids don't come out swinging. Or it's something that if you stick with and you start early, you can develop. Your brain will start to connect that way, and so the earlier you start, the better, of course. But that doesn't mean that you can't pick things up later on in life and learn them and learn how to be creative and be quite good at them. We talked about this, and maybe this is we talked about this being a topic, an ode to the late bloomers. There's plenty of late bloomers out there. I'm one. There are plenty of them out there that can do things well, that got started late. The thing that I think they have in common with those folks that start really young is they do have the stubbornness gene. They will stick with something until they just bend it to their will. I think that's the common. There's been a lot of research actually to that. I think it was and I gotta remember the name of it, but we talked about this person. He wrote the book Peak. I think it's Anders Ericsson. I think I'm not sure of the name, but the book is Peak, and that's the thing that he says, that that's the common denominator. It's the ability to stick with something when other people have fallen off.
I would say, on your point about creativity and sort of being a late bloomer, I probably would not have I would characterize myself as a late bloomer as it comes to creativity, but that was because I had decided somewhere along the way that I wasn't creative, which isn't the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? I chose to go with the route that was easier for me, which was being analytical and logical. And so where you put your focus, right, and your energy, that's what develops. And so that's what I did. And there came a point in time where I decided that I wanted to be artistic. I wouldn't have said necessarily creative, but creativity, artistic, bringing those people, those characteristics, developing those characteristics and bringing them out became very important for me. And so I was trying to express myself with painting and photography. And, as I said earlier, you can take a picture of something and it has no soul.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was, like, very technically it was correct, but it didn't speak. Right. And so for me, and this is my definition, anyway, it for me, having photography or a painting or a drawing that speaks to me is for me the definition of success in that area. And so when I started to recognize that, it's like, well, I can actually develop that. I don't have to just be logical and analytical. I can be this other thing, because I was using my logic and analytics in order to do the things that I wanted to do, but not quite getting the results. And it was the playing the piano. I think that was probably the first moment that I made this connection where I could not play a piece in front of my piano instructor, right? It was pretty complicated. I'm like no concert pianist or anything, but I progressed and I thought technically pretty good, and got to this one piece. It was pretty challenging. At home, I played it. I even played it what I thought was beautifully. I recorded it. It sounded nice. I was happy with it. Got in front of him and had stage fright. And I'm not someone who suffers stage fright generally. And so for whatever reason, I couldn't play it. And it was the moment I made a connection of being a perfectionist. And I'd never seen myself as a perfectionist before. And in that moment, it was like, oh, you're a perfectionist.
This is a problem.
You're a perfectionist. And this explains why you haven't done this, and this, right? Because it was like, well, subconsciously, it was like, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. But I hadn't connected the dots. And so I say all that to say, going to your point about necessarily saying, oh, I'm going to be creative today, I'm going to do this, or whatever it is, and not necessarily learning the lesson in the moment,
yep.
Right, is that something comes along and it helps you to connect the dots. And connecting the dots is a beautiful thing, right? And it's in the rear view mirror. The lessons are generally in the rear view mirror. And that's what the past is good for, right? Is helping you to learn the lesson. So I'm going to start to wrap this up. You got any final thoughts on what we talked about, or a comment on that as we prepare to
wrap up?
Absolutely.
I think that when we talk about art and we talk about the difference between being technically good and artful when it comes to your passion or leadership, two things: vulnerability and boldness. You need both of those. The people that can the people that can play the piece and you see their soul just dripping out of them, those are the people that are vulnerable. They're letting you see, they can put their pain out there through their music. We hear it in R&B. We hear it in all music.
Yes.
You hear it in all music, classical music, rock and roll. You hear it in all music. And the boldness sometimes to take a chance, to do something that maybe scares you, because you're not going to maybe get it right the first time, or the first 10 times,
or the first 110
right.
times.
But you know that it's a direction that you want to go. You're striving for something. If you can live in that, with that duality, vulnerability and boldness, you can be artful.
You dropped mics all over the place. Science and art, boldness and vulnerability. I can't top any of that. So I'm just going to wrap it up and say, well, it was an enlightening conversation. I'm sure a couple of months from now, I'll look back on this and I'll say, oh, I learned a lesson in that conversation with Robert. I'm sure I will, because every time we have these conversations, something occurs to me. I learn something new.
Same here.
Sometimes in the moment, sometimes it trickles in a little later. So
fantastic.
So we want to thank you for joining us for this episode. If there's anything that either of us can do in terms of helping you to identify your passions, work through them, learn some lessons, improve your leadership, help you move through some challenges, reach out to us. If you need some help with organizational development, we are available for you, for that as well. And so please feel to reach out, send an email, send a direct message, and we will certainly get back to you. We are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. This is the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And we wish you a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.